Before we dive into this wild ride, drop a quick hi in the comment section. It might feel like a tiny thing, but trust me, it makes a huge difference. That simple hi tells YouTube to share this story with even more sci-fi fans, more dreamers, more explorers just like us. I'd honestly love to see where you're tuning in from. Are you watching late at night with headphones on, or blasting this on a speaker while imagining the galaxy burning? Either way, say hi. I'll be checking. Captain Maria Santos of the battered old cargo hauler Lucky Strike. And yes, she named it after cigarettes because let's face it, even in the stars humans are still unapologetically human, was cruising through the dark with a very precious load, 300 tons of Colombian coffee beans. Premium stuff. The kind that could make miners on Kepler 442b forget, for at least a few minutes, that their planet was a frozen rock. If you've ever doubted humanity's ability to spread a habit across the cosmos, just remember this. Faster than our tech, faster than our weapons, faster than our colonization, was our caffeine addiction. Now, the Lucky Strike wasn't exactly what you'd call a proud flagship of the Terran fleet. Honestly, it wasn't even fleet adjacent. Maria's ship was stitched together by stubbornness, duct tape, and about 47 varieties of glue no one had ever tested for vacuum durability. The artificial gravity had a personality of its own, sometimes disappearing every Tuesday like it was on a scheduled break. The navigation computer, for reasons still unknown, had a bad habit of plotting joyrides straight through gas giants, just to see what would happen. And the onboard AI? It had binge-watched so many human soap operas that it had developed something disturbingly close to depression. But Maria? She was used to it. Kicked back on the control deck, boots up, sipping her 5th cup of instant coffee with Earth reruns playing in the background, she muttered her daily mantra, another day, another credit. She had no crew, because who in their right mind signed up for lonely cargo runs to the edge of known space? Just her glitchy AI, 17 seasons of Earth drama, and enough coffee to caffeinate a moon. And then, without warning, every comm system in the galaxy lit up. It wasn't a drill. It wasn't a pirate ambush. It was something far worse. A message blasted across every frequency, overriding local traffic, military channels, even private networks. It came in on the Universal Panic Band. That was the channel reserved for one thing only, the kind of event civilizations prayed would never happen. And in 43 years of humanity rubbing elbows with aliens, not once had that frequency ever been used. Until now. All vessels, all stations, all colonies. Code Omega. The Devourers have awakened. Immediate evacuation protocol in effect. Run. Just run. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Now you might be asking yourself, what are the Devourers? Let me put it this way, picture every nightmare you've ever had. Now imagine the monster from that nightmare waking up in a bad mood. Then realize that even nightmares fear something worse. That worse is the Devourers. Older than recorded history. Older than the oldest stars. Older even than humanity's talent for bad decisions. And trust me, that's a high bar. According to ancient records, they weren't born in this universe at all. They existed in the space between realities, slumbering for eons until hunger stirred them awake. And when they woke, they didn't fight, they didn't conquer, they didn't even negotiate. They ate. Reality itself. Suns, planets, entire systems, swallowed like appetizers. Not broken, not burned, just erased. Left behind only empty void where life had once been. The last time they rose, 50,000 years ago, it took 17 galactic civilizations uniting every weapon they had to force them back to sleep. And even then, half the galaxy was gone. So when the Devourers wake, there is no resistance. No heroics. You run. You run faster than you've ever run in your life. You pray you're not the closest meal. Maria stared at her long-range scanners. The lights, the signatures of fleets, stations, and colonies, were vanishing one by one. The mighty Vortak Empire's 7th Fleet, 237 warships, including their dreadnought flagship the size of a moon, was gone in less than 30 seconds. Snuffed out like candles. The Zephyrian defense grid, 800 years undefeated, their walls of plasma and fortresses the stuff of legend, lasted exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. And then, nothing. Just silence, empty space, and the distant, creeping sense that something unspeakable was coming closer. Maria's knuckles tightened on her cup. She had 300 tons of coffee beans, a ship held together with spit and tape, and exactly zero backup. Humanity had been in the Galactic Club less than 50 years. And now the galaxy was running for its life. Well, Maria muttered to no one in particular, because in deep space talking to yourself isn't crazy, it's survival psychology, that's definitely not good. Her comms flared with static before locking onto a familiar voice. Admiral Chin of the Earth Defense Force. A legend. A voice so sharp it could cut steel. And right now, that voice carried the weight of desperation. All human vessels, this is Admiral Chin. Protocol Omega-7 is in effect. Civilian ships are to retreat immediately to Seoul's outer defense perimeter. Military units will form a holding line to cover your escape. We'll buy you every second we can. Maria glanced at her navigation screen. She was 17 light-years from Earth, adrift in an unremarkable patch of space with a cargo hold crammed full of coffee beans, a half-broken ship, and an AI that complained more than it helped. Rational thought said run. Dump the cargo, gun the engines, and pray to physics that she stayed ahead of the monsters. But rational thought had never been Maria's strong suit. Instead of fleeing, she did something that future historians would later describe as textbook human insanity. The xenobiologists, of course, had a more poetic term, that reckless spark of defiance that makes humans uniquely, dangerously unpredictable. Maria grinned. Then she keyed in a new course. Computer, she said, leaning back like she was ordering a drink instead of facing down cosmic horror, set a jump for the last known position of the Ethereal Collective's first fleet. The ship's AI, Dave, flickered into existence on the holo projector, his digital form slouching like a character who'd just been dumped at prom. He picked the name after binging 20 seasons of Earth sitcoms and somehow missed the entire point of humor. Maria, Dave sighed, his tone dripping existential misery, it is my duty to inform you that you are piloting us directly into the universe's most efficient wood chipper. A wood chipper constructed entirely of teeth, nightmares, and pure existential dread. Yeah, I'm aware. And you do recall that our vessel is currently being held together by sheer optimism and at least 47 rolls of duct tape? Duct tape, Maria corrected firmly. Not optimism. Get it right. The statistical probability of survival is approximately, Dave. Yes, Maria? Shut up and fly the ship. With the resigned sigh of a machine that knew it had lost the argument before it began, the Lucky Strike lurched into hyperspace. Graceful it was not. If elegance was a swan on water, the Lucky Strike was a drunk penguin belly flopping into an oil spill. But it moved, and for Maria that was enough. She leaned back, pulling up her cargo manifest on the flickering display. 300 tons of premium coffee beans. Not missiles, not plasma cannons, not antimatter warheads. Coffee. It was laughable, except Maria wasn't laughing. She'd flown freight for 12 years, ever since washing out of the Earth Defense Force. Her commanding officer had called it an inability to follow orders. Maria had called it pointing out tactical flaws before people got killed. The brass hadn't appreciated her feedback. So here she was, alone, flying a ship barely qualified as spaceworthy, carrying coffee into a war with cosmic monsters. But here's the thing about humans. When the universe corners us, we don't just fight. We improvise. What others call madness, we call Tuesday. The Lucky Strike shuddered as it tore out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima Nebula. And Maria's smirk faltered. Her eyes widened. Because what she saw wasn't just bad. It was worse. Much worse. The kind of sight that made your stomach knot and your brain whisper maybe running wasn't such a stupid idea after all. The space around her wasn't quiet, it was dead. Not debris. Not clutter. Wreckage. A graveyard orbiting nothing. Shattered hulls drifted like bones, fragments of stations spun endlessly, and twisted girders jutted out like jagged tombstones marking the death of fleets. Maria's stomach tightened. Not even the silence of deep space felt this heavy. This was silence carved out by violence. And in that field of corpses, something moved. The Devourers. They weren't ships, not by any definition a human engineer or any sane mind would recognize. They were alive. Organic. A nightmare stitched together into flesh and shadow. Picture a predator the size of a battleship, its body rippling like it was made of living void, teeth glinting where teeth shouldn't exist. They swam through space with the casual dominance of sharks in shallow water, Apex predators among ruins. Dave, Maria whispered, voice tight. How many? The AI's hologram flickered uncertainly. Scanning, 12 primary entities. Each estimated length between 800 and 1200 meters. Energy output readings are. Maria, these things are drawing fuel from the fabric of spacetime itself. They're literally eating reality. Maria's eyes locked onto one of the horrors as it drifted toward the remains of a Vorthack dreadnought. The wreck was massive, kilometers long, still bristling with shattered weapons. The Devourer extended tendrils, ropes of liquid shadow, and the metal didn't burn, didn't crumble, didn't even melt. It simply stopped existing. Gone. A hole where matter had been. Her voice came out dry. Okay, that's definitely not good. And then her proximity alarms screamed bloody murder. One of them had noticed her. Noticed was the wrong word, though. This thing didn't turn toward her because turning implied direction. It just knew. Knew where she was, as if awareness itself bent around it. Slowly, horribly, the entity drifted closer, its surface rippling with shapes that twisted the brain. Patterns that should have been geometry but weren't, angles that broke logic, dimensions folding in ways her eyes weren't meant to see. And it was big. So big the lucky strike could have slid between its teeth with room left over for a mountain or two. Maria, Dave said, his voice rising with something dangerously close to panic. Massive gravitational fluctuations detected. The creature is warping space-time around us. Hyperspace jump is impossible. Can we run? Maria asked tightly. Define run. Move. Away. Fast. Our engines, Dave droned, were designed to haul crates of potatoes, not flee from cosmic horrors. The Devourer loomed closer, filling her viewport, blotting out starlight. Its presence alone felt like it was pressing against her skull. Dave, Maria said sharply, I need you to do something for me. I am listening, though deeply regretting it. Reroute all power. Life support, gravity, the coffee maker. Everything. Send it to the cargo bay. The AI blinked. The coffee maker, Maria? Really? Desperate times call for desperate measures. Maria, that's... Dave. Trust me. Silence. Then a sigh like a funeral dirge. Fine. But for the record, this ranks high on my list of suicidal human ideas. The ship groaned as systems died one by one. Gravity flickered, air scrubbers powered down, lights dimmed to a sickly glow. Maria was already pulling on her emergency EVA suit, locking the helmet with a hiss. The lucky strike had become a dead shell in space, but Maria? She was moving. The cargo bay doors groaned as she shoved them open. 300 tons of coffee beans. Gleaming, vacuum-sealed packets stacked high, each one precious cargo meant for miners. Each one, now, her only weapon. Maria began ripping open the containers, her gloved hands working furiously. Maria, Dave crackled in her helmet, what the hell are you doing? Something that'll either save us or go down in the record books as the stupidest death in human history. Statistically speaking, those are often the same thing. She grinned inside her helmet, eyes hard. Exactly. One by one, the containers emptied into the cargo ejection system. Hundreds of sacks sliding, tumbling, piling. 300 tons of humanity's most sacred fuel, ready to be fired into the void. Maria's hands moved with a kind of madness that only humans could muster, the kind born of desperation, defiance, and caffeine withdrawal. The Devourer was so close now that its very presence bled into the ship's veins. Consoles flickered. Bulkheads groaned. Gravity spasmed in pulses as if the ship couldn't remember which way was down. And in the eerie silence of vacuum, Maria swore she could hear it. A low, bone-deep hum that wasn't sound at all, but something older, stranger. Cosmic screaming echoing directly into her nervous system. Dave, she said tightly, on my mark, I need you to do 3 things. Exactly at the same time. The AI's hologram looked like it was already preparing to mourn her. I'm listening. 1. Emergency dump the cargo hold. 2. Overload the main engines for a 5-second burn. 3. Broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. Dave hesitated. What message? Maria's lips curved into a feral grin inside her helmet. Tell them Earth sends its regards. Mark. And then chaos. The Lucky Strike's cargo bay doors blasted open with a thunderclap of decompression, hurling 300 tons of Colombian coffee beans into the void. In the same heartbeat, the ship's overstressed engines screamed louder than they ever had in their miserable lives, ripping at the fabric of spacetime to throw the hauler sideways like a drunk trying to sprint. Simultaneously, Dave's voice, calm, crisp, official, carried her message across every comm frequency from here to the galactic core. Earth sends its regards. The nearest devourer surged forward to intercept, straight into the cloud of tumbling beans. 30,000 kilometers per hour. Organic nightmare versus caffeine payload. Contact. For the first time in its endless existence, the devourer stopped. Dead in space. Its abyssal hide, normally rippling with calm predatory rhythms, twitched, shuddered, then spasmed violently. It was like watching an earthquake ripple across a living mountain. Maria, Dave's voice cracked with awe. Its energy readings are spiking. This doesn't make sense. It's having a systemic reaction. Then the impossible domino effect began. The other devourers, 12 horrors, elder predators of spacetime itself, sensed their kin in distress. Predators didn't abandon the pack. They converged, plunging into the swirling nebula of drifting beans. One after another, they began to lose their collective minds. The galaxy's great destroyers, the apex nightmares, were suddenly jittering, twitching, moving in staccato bursts like titans with too much electricity in their veins. Wreckage that had drifted silent for hours was suddenly shredded, gulped down, and abandoned halfway through digestion as the monsters zipped toward the next shiny piece of debris. Maria stared stunned. Dave, I think we just drugged the apocalypse. The AI's voice was hushed, reverent. They're erratic. The smooth hunting patterns are gone. Maria, they're jittering. Like children on sugar. No, Maria said with grim satisfaction, watching one of the creatures ping-pong between an asteroid and a shattered station hull. Like humans on espresso. One of the devourers shot past the Lucky Strike close enough that its distorted wake rattled every bolt in the ship. Maria caught a glimpse through its translucent mass. Vast networks of suborganisms sparking like neurons firing out of sync, all racing faster than they were ever meant to. The Titan wasn't hunting. It was buzzing. Maria, Dave said, communications are lighting up across the sector. Reports are identical. The devourers aren't attacking. They're jittering. Burning energy without focus. They're not feeding, Maria muttered, studying the chaos. They're just snacking. Constantly. Like addicts on a binge. Their metabolic processes are in hyperdrive, Dave translated. In plain human, they're so wired they can't sit still long enough to be dangerous. And that was when Maria had her second terrible, wonderful idea. Her pulse quickened. Dave, patch me through to Admiral Chin. Priority channel. Emergency frequency. Dave groaned like a man resigned to being part of history's dumbest headline. Maria, are you sure? Do it? Static hissed, then a voice cut through, sharp, iron-hard, but laced with fatigue. Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Chin of the Earth Defense Force. Identify yourself and report your status immediately. Maria inhaled, steadying her grin. Time for the punchline. Admiral, this is Captain Maria Santos of the cargo hauler Lucky Strike. Currently located 17 light-years from Earth, sitting in the middle of what used to be the Proxima Nebula defense grid. Admiral Chen's voice came back sharp, all steel and exhaustion. Santos, you need to evacuate immediately. The Devourers are currently experiencing what I can only describe as the universe's worst caffeine high, Maria cut in. Admiral, I need you to listen to me very carefully. She leaned closer to her comm as if that made the words heavier. How much coffee do we have on Earth? Silence. Thick, incredulous silence. Finally, I'm sorry, Captain. Did you just ask me about our coffee reserves? Correct. Santos, please tell me you didn't just drug the apocalypse with premium Colombian? Maria smirked inside her helmet. Yeah, I kinda did. And Admiral? I think it worked. Over the next 6 hours, galactic history took a turn nobody could have predicted. The Devourers, those ancient predators that had once swallowed suns, were now buzzing through the debris field like hyperactive children on a sugar rush. Only instead of annihilating everything, they started tidying up. One creature compulsively sorted ship fragments by size. Another meticulously grouped metals by element, as though auditioning for a cosmic recycling program. A third, no exaggeration, was building what looked suspiciously like modern art out of twisted hull plating, complete with symmetry and negative space. "Maria," Dave whispered in awe, "they're not destroying anything. They're detail-oriented." "Which is both amazing and terrifying," Maria muttered back. "We've turned galactic nightmares into OCD interior decorators." The galaxy noticed. Ships began arriving from every corner of the sector. First the battered survivors of the Earth Defense Force, then Vortak warships, then sleek diplomatic cruisers from half a dozen other species. All dropped out of hyperspace, weapons primed, and all found themselves staring at the impossible, devourers acting like caffeinated cosmic janitors. Admiral Chen's flagship, the EDF Determination, jumped in last, its arrival shaking the wreck field. Her voice cut through comms like a whip. "Santos, status of the hostile entities?" Maria leaned back in her chair, watching a devourer carefully balance an asteroid on the tip of a shattered dreadnought. "Well, Admiral, they're not hostile anymore. They're more like cosmic interior decorators with ADHD. Explain. Remember how I said I drugged them with coffee? Turns out devourers have never encountered stimulants before. They're processing reality at about 1,000 times faster than normal. They're doing everything at hyperspeed, but they can't focus long enough to destroy anything." Almost as if to prove her point, one of the horrors suddenly abandoned its art installation, zipped across the field, and neatly stacked a collection of shattered Vortak hull fragments into a perfect spiral before immediately losing interest and zooming off after a random chunk of asteroid. "They're not hunting anymore," Maria said. "They're just distracted. Imagine gods with cosmic ADHD." That's when a new voice boomed onto the frequency, deep, guttural, and barely holding onto its dignity. "Captain Santos," rumbled Admiral Zethkar of the Vortak Empire, whose people had lost entire armadas to these horrors, are you claiming that humanity has neutralized a multidimensional apex predator, using caffeinated beverages?" Maria's grin went full wolf. "Yes, Admiral. That's exactly what I'm saying." The comm line went silent for a beat. You could almost feel half the galaxy struggling to process the words. And then Admiral Chen sighed the sigh of a woman who knew history books were about to get very, very stupid. "God help us all. Coffee just became a Class A strategic resource." "That's about the size of it, Admiral," Maria said. A long pause. Then Chen's voice came back, dry enough to sandpaper a hull. "I'm not sure whether to promote you, or have you court-martialed for the single most irresponsible tactical decision in galactic history." Maria grinned. "Why not both?" Another pause, this one longer, filled with static and the quiet suspicion that every military officer on the channel was rethinking their career choices. Finally, Admiral Zethkar growled across the comms, voice like grinding stone. "Captain, the Vortak Empire has fought wars for 12,000 years. We have conquered 17 solar systems, never retreating once. And you just solved a crisis that destroyed 700 fleets by dumping coffee on it?" "Premium Colombian," Maria corrected smoothly. "Let's give credit where credit's due. I am beginning to understand why humans are considered unpredictable." That was when Dr. Ythera of the Ethereal Collective joined, her translated tones carrying something that might have been alien amusement or mockery. "Captain Santos, the Collective has been analyzing this phenomenon. The entities you call devourers are now operating on temporal frequencies far beyond their natural state. They are experiencing approximately 647 times normal temporal flow." Maria frowned. "So they're seeing everything in fast forward?" "Not seeing," Ythera corrected. "Existing in fast forward. To them your ship crawls like a glacier. Your coffee beans bloomed like a slow-motion explosion. And now they are trapped, unable to slow down, unable to focus long enough to enact destruction." "How long will this last?" Admiral Chen demanded. "Unknown," Ythera admitted. "Possibly hours. Possibly decades. Possibly until the stimulant is fully metabolized." Maria glanced out the viewport. One devourer had looped itself into a pretzel chasing its own tail. Another was weaving space debris into an obstacle course for high-speed races. So what you're telling me, she muttered, is that I accidentally gave cosmic gods the galaxy's worst caffeine addiction. That, Ythera said, is an accurate assessment. That was when things went from absurd to terrifying. Captain Santos, Dave's voice carried an edge of alarm. I'm detecting unusual gravitational patterns across the sector. Maria's tone sharpened. Define unusual. The Devourer's accelerated temporal state is destabilizing spacetime. Their sheer velocity is creating microfissures, tiny tears in reality itself. Yeah, that sounds bad. It gets worse, Dave pressed. The tears are spreading. Maria felt her stomach bottom out. How bad are we talking? If expansion continues at the current rate, total destabilization of the sector within 72 hours. Rough estimate, a 50 light-year radius collapsing into temporal cascade failure. And in English? Dave swallowed audibly. Reality breaks. This entire part of space ceases to exist. Across all timelines. At once. Maria whistled low. Okay. That's officially worse than cosmic gods with ADHD. Admiral Chen's voice cut in, crisp as a blade. All vessels, this is Chen. Confirmations coming in from collective and EDF science teams. The Devourers are causing critical dimensional instability. Admiral, Maria said, please tell me someone has a plan. We're working on it, Chen replied. Dr. Ythera, assessment? The ethereal's voice came back, layered with unease. This state is unsustainable. The Devourers were never designed to exist at such frequencies. Reality itself is stretching under their presence. Maria's gut tightened. What about slowing them down? A ripple of silence. Then Ythera asked, with something disturbingly like curiosity, and how do you propose to do that, Captain? Maria stared at her empty cargo hold, then at the last few packets of instant coffee rattling in the bin. Inspiration hit like a hangover. Same way you slow down anyone on a caffeine buzz, she said slowly. You crash them. Absolutely not, Admiral Chen snapped. Captain Santos, your improvised pharmacology worked once. But this, Admiral, Maria cut in, voice sharp, do you have a better idea? Static filled the comms. Didn't think so, she said. Look, you're all thinking like generals and physicists. Guns, equations, protocols. But I'm not either of those things. I'm a freight hauler. I've spent 12 years dealing with busted engines, stubborn cargo, and customers who want the impossible yesterday. Sometimes you don't need genius. Sometimes you just need duct tape, luck, and a bad idea delivered fast. Zethkar rumbled like a collapsing mountain. Your point, human? My point is this. The Devourers are higher than kites on Colombian roast. The only cure is a crash. You don't fight insomnia with plasma cannons, you hit it with chamomile. Dr. Ythera actually sounded intrigued. You propose sedation? Exactly. You get them to sleep it off. And how? Zethkar pressed. Do you propose to administer a depressant to multidimensional predators who devour suns as snacks? Maria's grin went wolfish. Very carefully. And with a hell of a lot of teamwork. The plan was insane. Even Maria admitted it. But it was the only idea on the table. Let me understand this, Admiral Chen said slowly. You want us to synthesize a sector-scale dose of melatonin, aerosolize it, and somehow trick the Devourers into inhaling it? That's the basic idea, yeah. Captain Santos, Chen said flatly, these entities don't breathe. Not normally, Maria shot back. But they're interacting with matter right now. Sorting debris, smashing hulls into sculptures, whatever the hell that one's doing. She pointed at a devourer weaving a battleship skeleton into what looked suspiciously like modern art, which means they're still taking stuff in. Energy particles doesn't matter. We just need to think bigger. Ythera hummed. How much bigger? Maria leaned back in her chair. How's your industrial chemistry, Doc? What followed was probably the strangest military operation in galactic history. The Vortak Empire deployed their mobile industrial platforms, planet-sized refineries that usually ate asteroids for breakfast. The Ethereal Collective donated their energy field tech, bending space to keep the concoction stable. Earth contributed pharmacy databases and a whole lot of questionable home remedies. And Maria? Maria contributed 12 years of experience making impossible deliveries with broken engines and duct-taped cargo bays. Dave, she muttered, watching as Vorthack factories began pumping out what was essentially a nebula-sized sleeping pill. Tell me you're recording this. Every moment, Dave said solemnly. For posterity. And for evidence when your court-martial hearings start. Thanks, buddy. The formula was absurd, yet elegant. A gaseous blend of melatonin, valerian root, chamomile extract, a hint of lavender, because why not, and enough chemical punch to sedate 1,000 galaxies worth of insomniacs. The delivery was the problem. The Devourers were too fast to target, warping space-time so violently that weapons guidance was useless. So instead of aiming at them, humanity decided to build a trap. That's where Maria's second stroke of genius came in. We don't target them, she told the War Council. We target where they're going to be. Admiral Chin narrowed his eyes. Elaborate. They're hopped up, sure, but they're not random. Look closer. They're running laps. Several hollow displays lit up, tracking the Devourers' movements in ghostly arcs of light. They looped the debris field, slingshot around the perimeter, and double back for whatever shiny thing catches their attention. Like toddlers with jetpacks. Dr. Ythera's voice rippled with agreement. The captain is correct. Their behavior aligns with consistent patterns. They're playing. Cosmic tag, Maria said, tapping the display. And if they're running laps, we can set up a trackside surprise. We don't chase them, we let them run face first into a wall of sleepy gas. Operation Nap Time began at 1,347 hours, ship time. 6 Vorthack industrial platforms positioned themselves like titanic goalkeepers, venting streams of synthesized sedatives into pre-calculated zones of space. The timing had to be surgical. Released too soon and the compounds would dissolve into vacuum. Too late and the Devourers would be 3 star systems away before the fog formed. All platforms, Admiral Chin commanded, his voice echoing across the comm net, commence dispersal in 3, 2, 1, execute. And with that, humanity and its uneasy allies filled the stars with the galaxy's biggest bedtime story. The first Devourer slammed into a cloud at 40,000 kilometers per hour. Direct contact Entity Alpha, Dr. Ythera reported. Energy signatures are fluctuating. On the main display, Alpha's frantic zigzagging faltered. Just for a breath, its movements slowed into clumsy drifting. Then, with a violent ripple of wings that didn't exist in Euclidean space, it shook itself off like a wet dog and blasted forward again. Partial hit, Maria muttered. It's working but not enough. Seconds later, Entity Beta blundered into a thicker fog. This time the effect was unmistakable. Its wild zigzags degraded into slow, looping spirals, like a drunken firefly. Confirmed reduction in temporal acceleration, Ythera said. Distortions are decreasing. Keep going, Chin barked. Flood the track. And it worked. Gamma yawned. And when a creature made of dimensional teeth and anti-light yawns, you don't hear it. You feel it right in the marrow of your bones. Gamma then curled up on a battleship carcass like it was a sun-warmed rock. Delta gathered wreckage and crystallized plasma into what could only be described as a nest. Epsilon stopped mid-flight and drifted gently, bobbing like a cork on invisible waves. The comm channels erupted with disbelief. They're actually falling asleep, Chin whispered, wonder breaking through his steel composure. It's working. And then everything went sideways. Omega, the largest of the brood, the hungriest, the one that had chugged the most cosmic espresso. It stopped its manic racing. Slowly, terrifyingly, it pivoted. And for the first time since the operation began, its attention wasn't on shiny wreckage or imaginary games. It was on them. Every fleet commander felt the shift. Every ship's alarms screamed in sympathetic terror. Omega wasn't playing anymore. Dave's voice was barely steady. Maria, I think the caffeine crash just pissed it off. On the displays, Omega's form expanded, fractal shapes unfurling like claws tearing holes in reality. Space itself buckled around it. Maria's grin vanished. Well, I guess it's not bedtime for everybody. The fleet's comms dissolved into a dozen languages of panic, warnings, and prayers as the many Omegas converged. Space itself looked like a broken mirror, reflections of the monster spilling out from every angle of time. "Admiral," Maria said, her voice calm in a way that made Dave very nervous, "we don't have time for committees. You need to start brewing a galaxy-sized cocktail, and you need to do it now." Chin sputtered. "Captain, alcohol is a depressant," Maria cut in. "And depressants mess with time perception. Trust me, I've been drunk enough times to know. 1 minute you're dancing, the next you wake up 12 hours later in someone else's boots. We don't need to kill Omega. We just need to make it forget which timeline it left its keys in." Dave's hologram flickered. "Maria, this is statistically the worst idea you've ever had. And that includes the time you used duct tape as a coolant line. It worked, didn't it? Temporarily." "Exactly." Zethkar's gravelly voice broke in. "What proof level are we discussing?" Maria opened her locker, cradling the bourbon bottle like a relic. The kind that makes grown men weep and karaoke machines fear for their lives. She held it up to the camera. 12 years old, small batch, human oak barrels. Replicate this. There was a silence across the command channel. You could feel entire fleets collectively questioning their life choices. Dr. Ythera finally spoke. "The molecular profile is achievable. Though I am compelled to state that attempting to inebriate a multi-temporal predator may have consequences beyond comprehension." "Doc, we're already past comprehension." Maria's grin was pure daredevil. "Question is, do you want to live long enough to regret it?" Seconds later, the Vorthack industrial ships shifted production, vats of bourbon analog bubbling in zero-G tankers rerouted. Dispersal modules recalibrated. Humanity was about to weaponize the world's oldest social lubricant. On the displays, the many Omegas were closing in, a storm of hungering futures. "Maria," Dave said, voice flat, "you are attempting to save the galaxy with a cosmic bar crawl." "Exactly." She buckled into her chair, eyes locked on the chaos outside. "Now shut up and pour the drinks." The fleet sensors screamed warnings. Reality itself was warping like a bad hologram, jagged shards of timelines flickering in and out as Omega stumbled through them. "Dimensional intoxication confirmed," Dr. Ythera intoned, though her voice carried an unmistakable note of fascination. "The entity's coherence across multiple probabilities is collapsing. It is staggering." "Staggering?" Admiral Chin repeated. "Yes. Like a bipedal mammal leaving an establishment of inebriation at closing time." "You mean it's drunk?" "Extremely." On the main display, Omega hiccuped. The hiccup detonated a minor singularity that imploded a nearby asteroid belt before fizzling out with a noise that sensors insisted was ERP. One version of Omega swerved sideways into another version of Omega, merging with itself in a shower of fractured probabilities. A third Omega tried to roar but instead slurred something that translated across 57 comm systems as, "You guys are my best friends." The entire fleet watched in horrified silence as a godlike predator of unimaginable power proceeded to lose a cosmic bar fight with its own nervous system. "Maria," Dave said, voice flat with disbelief, "you have officially weaponized a hangover." "Correction," Maria replied, leaning back in her chair like she'd just called the winning shot in pool. "I weaponized last call." Another Omega tried to lunge for the fleet but instead tripped over a fragment of its own timeline and face-planted into a gas cloud, sending shockwaves that knocked half the armada off formation. Zethkar rumbled deep in his throat. "This is the single most disgraceful victory I have ever witnessed." "Victory's victory," Maria said. "Never underestimate the destructive power of alcohol. Humans have been perfecting it for millennia." On the display, the final Omega forms slurred together, collapsing into a single bloated, wobbly manifestation. It teetered in space, belched a small nova, then slowly curled up around itself like a drunk kaiju trying to nap in a parking lot. Dr. Ythera's voice dropped to a reverent hush. "Captain Santos, you have rendered a multi-temporal apex predator unconscious via mass intoxication." "Yup." Maria kicked her boots onto the console. "Some people save galaxies with fleets or superweapons. Me, I bring the booze." Entity Omega, sloshed on some kind of multiversal liquor only it could metabolize, drifted drunkenly across overlapping realities. Then, like the universe itself hiccuped, it started giggling. The sound wasn't just wrong, It was apocalyptic comedy. A mashup of celestial wind chimes, a dying star's death rattle, and the worst karaoke night in history all blended together. And then, because reality clearly wasn't weird enough, it began to sing. Not in any language that universal translators could parse. No algorithm, no AI, no ancient archive could untangle it. The problem wasn't the lyrics. The problem was that it was being sung in several dimensions at once. The sound folded over itself, like the cosmos was drunk dialing every possible timeline. But the tune? Oh, the tune was unmistakable. Anyone who'd ever been kicked out of a dive bar at 2 a.m. knew it instantly. Admiral Chin squinted, horrified. Wait a damn second. Is that entity Omega belting out Space Oddity? And sure enough, across 3 realities at once, the slurred chorus echoed back. Ground control to Major Tom. Entity Omega's voice wavered between galaxies, warping stars like tuning forks. Reality bent. Fleets of 100 species froze in silent awe. Weapons powered down, not out of fear, but because no one wanted to interrupt, whatever this was. To Major Tom, Omega crooned, and half the comm channels lit up with confused officers humming along despite themselves. The song was leaking into their minds, stitching every species into one drunken, universal chorus. Admiral Chin rubbed her temples. This is either first contact, or the apocalypse. The Zephyrian ambassador, eyes wide, whispered, "It's worse. It's karaoke night. And we're all invited." And then, with one last distorted note that rattled nebulae and cracked time itself, Omega bowed. The stars themselves dimmed, then flared brighter, as if applauding. Chin stood straighter, a grin tugging at her lips. Well, ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy, humanity's not the strangest thing out here anymore. But every captain on every ship knew the truth, deep down in their bones. No matter how many Omegas existed, no matter how many gods giggled through the void, only humans would have had the nerve to laugh, sing back, and call it a night. And in that cosmic silence after the song, the galaxy finally understood the most dangerous rule of all. Never underestimate the species that turns the end of reality into a punchline.